So my name's Tom. I'm one of the business development managers here at Thrive, and I'm joined by Jack and Sean from Kensington Mortgages company, who are one of our clients. Jack and Sean, I don't know if you just want to quickly introduce yourself, say a little bit about who you are and your involvement and your roles at Kensington Mortgages.
Yeah, so I'm Sean. Yeah, I'm the learning development manager at Kensington, and we've got a team of 4 in L&D, one of which is Jack. He'll tell you about himself in a second. I don't know if people know about Kensington, but Kensington Mortgages, we are probably not necessarily a household name if you think of mortgage companies, but we are the largest independent lender in the UK, so the largest non-bank lender, and also the fastest growing specialist lender as well. And when we talk about specialist lending, really, we're tailoring our products to customers who perhaps wouldn't be served by the high street. So it may be that where a lot of high street lenders use a highly automated way of assessing someone for a mortgage, that has benefits of kind of processing volumes, and you get a quick answer maybe, but also it can be a kind of a computer says no situation, where we very much use experienced underwriters to assess each application individually. And so we're therefore able to serve customers who circumstances might be a bit more complex, I suppose. Maybe they're self-employed, got high levels of variable income and things like that. So we've got about 500 employees in Kensington right now. Jack, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Jack. I'm the senior learning consultant at Kensington Mortgages, and I work alongside Sean, and I'm the one that kind of works with the LXP to kind of, from when we sort of took Thrive's product to now with the implementation. And of course, the next step is then to strategize and understand how we're going to use Thrive going forward. So it's just a brief intro as to who I am.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. So just to kind of set the scene a little bit in terms of the purpose of the agenda for today, I think we're going to focus a little bit initially on the relationship, I guess, between Thrive and Kensington, how that came about, what your plans were, where you've come from in terms of incumbent learning management systems, and actually kind of what your desire was when it came to implementing an LXP. We'll then have a little bit of a quick look at your Thrive implementation, and then, as I say, we'll ask or answer any questions that come from the floor at the end. I guess just to kind of touch on that first piece around that background. So I think we started engaging with Kensington back end of last year, around August time, as part of a kind of formalized RFP process. I'm not going to I'll let you, Jack and Sean, kind of pick up on the relationship side of things from your side, your perspective. But I think it's fair to say it was a fairly robust tender process. I think you had a clearly defined set of requirements and ideas of kind of what you were looking to achieve and where you were looking to come from. I know that you had like I say, an incumbent learning management system that was particularly well established within the financial service sector, and had that for a fair amount of time. And yeah, it'd be good if you can just kind of talk a little bit about your experiences of that LMS, and I guess, yeah, the challenges that you've had and what you were looking to achieve from a learning experience platform.
So I suppose, yeah, the previous LMS that we had, it was really one of the main reasons the business chose that at the time, which was probably about 5-6 years ago. The need then was to provide regulatory content around some of the mandatory subjects that we need to make sure our employees are up to speed on, so things like financial crime and all the financial services regulation. So that was one of the driving forces behind choosing the LMS then, as well as being able to kind of keep adequate training records. When that kind of arrangement came to an end, or was coming to an end, we kind of took a conscious business to really think about, well, what do we want from an LMS going forward, and actually we want something more. So rather than learning management system, we were really looking for more of a learning experience platform, which is what Thrive is. And so that's why we were particularly drawn to Thrive from the different options that we looked at. Jack, I don't know if you want to say a little bit more about our thoughts around that time, or?
Yeah, so the LMS that we were with previously, it was fit for purpose 6 years ago when we first used it. We then started to realize that the way that we envisaged sort of self-service access for learners became quite a struggle. And so I'm sure for anybody that is on this stream, maybe in a very similar circumstance where you are looking for a learning management system. Probably a LXP isn't the first thing that comes to mind. You may have never have heard of an LXP before, but I remember going to the Learning Technologies a couple of years ago and being overwhelmed by all of the different learning management systems that are on offer, where they looked really nice from the front end, but in reality they were just way too complicated to actually use. The customization meant that you had to go through the support team, and so we wanted something simple, and we wanted something that could really help us really as a learning and development team really quickly deploy something that meant that it wasn't as hard for us to maintain, or if it was, it would be as you can see in the screen share, this is our current site, sort of like accessibility of content. And I think, you know, where we can customize it on our previous LMS, it was very rigid and you had to gain access through the support team for them to do the changes, whereas we have the flexibility to do that. And I think that's some of the sort of reasons as to why we moved away from LMS and towards an LXP. And of course, I think sometimes when you look at some of these LMSs, and one of the reasons why we went for Thrive is because it is that simple. And I mean simple in terms of from an administrator or a user, it is a lot simpler to navigate and be able to do things that you wouldn't otherwise take you about 10 days to otherwise set up on a LMS, which I've experienced firsthand with a few other sort of providers in the market.
And I guess
the other thing as well, it's fair to say, is when we were looking at a new LMS or LXP, is that the previous LMS was really something that our colleagues used because they had to, and it was kind of, okay, I've got to do my mandatory training this month, and it was never really a choice, if you like. It was more of a chore to use that, whereas we wanted to move to something where people wanted to use it and were finding it useful and not just kind of going through the motions of ticking a box each month. And so again, yeah, that's, I think, something that we've got with Thrive.
Brilliant. And I guess it's, you know, the reality is though that you are within a financial services sector, and so you have to have that compliance piece as well, don't you? You still need to be able to report and take to C-suite and say that you are compliant in anti-money laundering and what have you. So I guess it's striking a balance between that transactional linear learning piece, but also, like you say, that the relevance of content through a personalized user experience as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, we already had some kind of bespoke content around some of the subjects that we as a team or as a business around things like data protection, which we were able to upload into Thrive. It's fair to say that some of the other content that we had with the previous LMS, we're having to kind of come up with different solutions or find different ways of delivering that. But again, it was kind of a trade-off between, well, that was the only benefit really, or the main benefit from our existing provider was the content, whereas this gives us so much more flexibility in terms of creating our own or uploading content that can be found elsewhere. And it's much more engaging.
And to add to Sean's point as well, I think where a lot of people were navigating away from sites that we could track what people were exploring or sharing with other people, it was being missed. Where, say, I'd go onto YouTube, I'd find a video, I'd share it with a colleague over an email, and then the people that could otherwise have taken advantage of that video have missed that opportunity. And I think this is one of the great things about Thrive is that, you know, yes, you do have to go out to YouTube and find that video, but once you found it, you can then share it with the whole community, either it be the organization or even a specific level within that organization, depending on what you set up in the background. But the main thing is you've got it all in one place, and you can bring that relevance into your learning experience platform, which I think is so much better than what we've experienced in the past with previous LMSs.
Brilliant. So I guess it's, you know, you're saying that all those behaviours that your learners are evidencing over the previously in terms of sharing of content, you just didn't have sight of it. And now with Thrive or as an LXB, and they're doing it within the platform, you have greater visibility of what people are sharing, what people are looking for and asking for.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Tom, I know we haven't really kind of mentioned it yet, but we're very much in the early stages of implementation. We only implemented this back in February, so we're only a month and a bit after our implementation. So we've still got lots to learn ourselves, but we found, you know, a lot more collaboration and sharing has taken place on this just in the first month and a half of, you know, taking or adopting it. So yeah.
Brilliant. And is there any, I guess that's a nice little segue, is there any other behaviours or changes that you've noticed from your learners since adopting a new platform? I appreciate things have perhaps been a little bit disrupted over the last couple of months, but.
Yeah, so I think we've kind of had multiple things adapted within the last couple of months. So we've had Office 365 and Microsoft Teams come into it. So that's sort of like our communication piece. We've now got this as well that's kind of been implemented as well. And I think the adoption has taken its time for it to be embedded with the situation that's currently unfolding with this COVID-19 virus. It's also force a lot of people to have to adopt it because of the fact that you know, we are no longer in the same office. We no longer have that interaction that we would have done, and so the adoption is somewhat forced. But in certain ways, it's not a bad thing. But you know, of course, situation is very bad. But it just means that we've taken advantage of a really terrible situation in other people then having to adopt this system because they have to. And we'll probably talk more about this a bit later on in terms of how we've been able to share videos that we would have otherwise have delivered in the classroom via face-to-face to try and get people upskilled and trained, but also reducing the contact time that we would otherwise have with them in the classroom, so, or webinar, whatever it may be.
Brilliant. And yeah, again, a lovely little segue. Thank you, Jack. In terms of kind of what those changes look like that you were looking to encourage, I know one of the key stats, and we've obviously spoken about this before, but one of the key stats that I guess is a nice little metric to work from is that with your previous learning platform, your delivery of content was something like 73% or 72% face-to-face. And one of the main drivers for implementing a platform like this was to reduce that with, you know, new mediums of content delivery. So I guess it's about that changing behavior, and I guess what the future looks like is for more virtual content, as you say, to be delivered through Thrive.
Yeah, I think there's a number of reasons why we wanted to try and reduce the amount of face-to-face training that we deliver, because we have, it's fair to say, there's been a number of challenges as probably many businesses face in delivering face-to-face training, in that sometimes it's very difficult for people to kind of come away from their day job for a couple of hours to attend a classroom session, particularly our teams that are on the phones. And then you have people who then register for a face-to-face session and can't attend for several months because there's not a big enough audience on it. And so by the time they do attend, it's kind of the moment's past. And so what we, again, this helps us to do with using Thrive is to really provide content people can access in the moment, on demand when they need it, not have to wait for a classroom session. So I'm not putting a number on what percentage of face-to-face training we want to deliver in 6 months' time, because I think you still need to kind of look at, well, what is the best method of delivery for what it is you're trying to achieve. But equally, I fully expect that there will be a high percentage of our training will be delivered virtually or through Thrive, and the amount that we deliver face-to-face will be minimal. And that helps us address some of the challenges that we've been having anyway. In the past, we've not had an alternative method of delivery, so it's this is actually helping us to do that.
Great. Yeah. So I guess the reality is the timing of this COVID-19 crisis is unfortunate, but also it's forcing upon these changes to the business, but actually they're the changes that you were looking to adopt anyway longer term. So
they were, you're right, and it has kind of forced it perhaps a little bit earlier than we'd envisaged. As Jack said, we only launched Thrive in February, the end of February as well. So we're only less than 2 months into using it as a platform. And so initially we had quite a spike of usage. It's fair to say, as things have got really busy since everyone's working from home and the current crisis, some of our teams in particular have just been so kind of overwhelmed with custom calls and stuff that they're just not having an opportunity to maybe use Thrive as much as we might have hoped by now. But we hope that will change over time. And what it has allowed us to do in the meantime is where we've had to train up extra people to support the business areas that are really under pressure. We can provide supporting content on Thrive, whether that be videos or articles, which can help those people who are perhaps supporting in roles that they wouldn't normally be doing.
Yeah.
So that certainly helped us reach a bigger audience, I suppose, in a quicker space of time.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, Sean, I think there's things that are out of our control, like this COVID-19 virus, and I think the things that we are in control of now is taking stock of the situation, seeing how we can support our colleagues. So you can see on this highlight section, there's some sort of like key things that we've kind of had sort of like come to us, either it be through our inbox or be it a conversation that we've had with some of our colleagues, and they've gone, how do we blur our background? How do I start a video call in Teams? How do I stay sane during home isolation? And even things like fitness, things that you wouldn't really usually maybe think about as being something related to your sort of learning and development programs that you offer. So NHS Couch to 5K, I don't know everyone's situation in terms of participants on this stream, but you know, here within the UK, we are limited to one bit of exercise per day, and this will just help with the well-being of our colleagues to think, okay, so how can you get from couch to 5K if that is your only opportunity to leave the house? And so it's not just about learning, it's about the well-being, it's about the wider picture that might not have been something that would have been on our agenda, which in this case it was prior to COVID-19. But it's just to think about, it's not just about the day-to-day operations of the business, it could also be other items that you might not have thought about at the moment as to how this LXP could really be useful to support your colleagues.
Brilliant. Well, that again, you beat me to it, Jack. The next thing I was going to move on to was actually looking at your site, and the first thing as part of that was the highlights reel and the homepage. And I guess I think it's fair to say that a majority of the content that you're leveraging at the moment is, you know, I don't want to say it's related to COVID-19 because we're sick and tired of that, but it is around the business's response to that, and also, like you say, a lot of the mental health supporting material to help your teams and your learners through this period of isolation and kind of challenge, I suppose. Yeah,
I mean, we're trying to update the highlights topics pretty much every day or every few days, just to keep it fresh, keep people's interest, so that when people do log on, they are seeing different things. And yeah, we're really trying to focus those highlights on things that are relevant to people right now, and those things that, yeah, people can see at a glance, think, oh yeah, I really need to know how to do that. So video calls, for example, and the background blur, that's just something that's come up in the last couple of days, where we've identified that a lot of the business aren't using video calls as much as maybe we are in the HR team, and have been since we transitioned to this home working. So we wanted to just get out there to make sure something quick that, you know, people can understand how they do it, how easy it is to do it, and it's literally a 2-minute video. And the financial tips. Again, we're doing a lot of stuff around well-being, and particularly through the current situation, personal well-being, and also the point was raised about, well, what about financial well-being? A lot of people are finding themselves in financial difficulties, employees as well as customers. And so is there stuff that we can share with our workforce that can help people in this situation? So that's gone down pretty well, actually.
Brilliant. And so in terms of the content that you're sharing, is that typically a mix of curated and created content, or is it predominantly content that you're finding from external sources at the moment?
Yeah, it's a bit of both, isn't it? So yeah, for example, the financial tips was something that was forwarded on by one of our HR colleagues. She'd been provided with this by one of our partners, and we were able to share that. So we got that up on the site yesterday. For the video calls content, that was something that, again, we identified a need, and we just did a bit of searching online and found some content. We've also got the resource through Anders Pink and Get Abstract, which I don't know how familiar people are with that, but that's an opportunity to kind of upload lots of content, really. And what we're trying to do with that, again, it's early days for us, but we're trying to really filter the content that comes through, so that it is stuff that is really targeted to the current needs of the business.
And also, I was going to say, take advantage of some of the creator sort of tool providers. So like Beyond, for example, they're providing a lot of free source videos at the moment on, say, stay sane throughout while self-isolating, and you can take a link from that and share it on the LXP. And these sort of things that you might not think as being, does it really fit, doesn't it fit, or even looking at the so there we go, there it is there. This is a video from Beyond. It's a demo video. We don't have any sort of subscription with Beyond. We just are part of the mailing list, and this was something that came up, and I've actually put the source as being Beyond, so that I've listed it so that if anybody is interested to find out more. But as I say, it's just good just to share sometimes some of the free stuff that's already available, especially in this time. A lot of companies are sharing a lot of useful articles, a lot of sort of videos, either it be through YouTube or Vimeo or wherever it may be. And so just my only advice would be is that if you think it's appropriate, I'm sure other people would think it's appropriate too, so just share away.
Brilliant. Perfect. And so in terms of the practical kind of configuration of the homepage, I think my internet's a little bit slow. I'll go back here. In terms of the practical kind of setup and configuration of the site as part of the implementation, I know I'm going to quickly address this. You normally have a component at the bottom made up of questions from your team, but for privacy and data protection, we've kind of hidden that for the time being. But how did you decide on kind of what content you wanted to be presenting to your learners in the first instance?
Good question. I think we were given the site. It was a blank canvas. Thankfully, our customer relationship manager had already uploaded quite a few bits of off-the-shelf content that Thrive provide. And so it didn't look like a blank learning management or learning experience platform that so many of you, if ever you've been in that adoption stage, have been in that sort of situation and thought, what am I supposed to do in this situation? So we have a number of different workshops that we go through before we actually launch the learning experience platform with the customer relationship managers. And so we talk about the sort of user experience, we talk about the content that's needed to be uploaded, as well as user generated content. And so as a result of that, we can then formulate how this page will then look. And as part of the user sort of experience content workshop, we then decided how we're going to lay this out. And as you can see at the top, we've got like this banner, and so this is to sort of get people's attention, and it has a date as to when it runs to and from. If you click on it, like Tom has just done, there is also some related content, which I know Sean has been the one that created this campaign. But as you can see down the bottom there's just a few examples of managing stress being one of them. That's one of the off-the-shelf content. And there's our customer relationship manager, Phil, who was the one that uploaded it. So with that, the layout is all based upon the sort of the meetings that we have with Thrive to understand what is, based on their experience with other clients, the best layout. And they showed us a number of learning experience platforms that they work with different clients. And so one client had this layout, another client had another layout. And so for us, we thought that the most appropriate way was to have the highlights. We control that ourselves as a learning and development team or admin. And so that content is not auto-generated. That is related to what we think is the most appropriate items. And then beneath that, what we have is we have the Your Core training, which is where sort of the pathways that we assign to users. So this is a sort of mandatory course for new joiners, and so it's a company welcome day, which is the event which is with that multicolored welcome on the left there. You then have number of other events associated with that as well, which is sort of like consuming content which we would otherwise maybe talk to them about in the welcome day, and it's there to kind of condense down that sort of that contact time. So as I say, that's just an example of a pathway, and as you can see back on where Tom's just waving his mouse just down the bottom with the important information you need to know, we then kind of clumped them together. So any mandatory learning that the new joiner needs to do, this is where they can then go and complete that. So it's all one place for them to be able to complete that. Now, Tom, if you could just go back to the Learning Experience Platform homepage. A lot of people's feedback when they first get onto the LXP, especially from our organisation, is it's really busy. There's a lot of tiles to look at, but once you start to get used to it, things like the recommended for you, that can really be filtered down based upon your interests. So when you first join onto the Learning Experience Platform, it'll ask you what your interests are, and there'll be numerous amounts of tags that you can choose. And when you click on that your interest, what will happen is it will then kind of filter down content that you've chosen as a specific tag. And with that, that can then enable you to find the content that you really are interested in. And so then you've got shared with your group, shared with you, popular with your team, and then following. And they're all related to if you follow anybody or if there's anybody in your team that has made a piece of content popular. But as I say, that's already pre-populated in terms of a field that the customer relationship manager already set out for us. So in terms of stuff we need to do, we just added the Your Core training really, and the site was pretty much ready to go.
I guess it's fair to say though that it's an iterative process, isn't it? That the way that your learners are going to be adapting and adopting this platform, they've obviously come from a very different experience when it comes to learning platforms. And so like when we take the user generated content piece, for example, that at the moment you're allowing them to upload quizzes and questions, but actually the more that they get used to user generated content, you might open that up so that they can start sharing different pieces of content.
Yeah, we absolutely, as a L&D team, we took that decision that we'll limit it initially in terms of what the rest of the business can upload, so that we've got some control over it, but we have also given people the option, if they find content that they think is suitable, we've got an inbox that they can send it to us, and over time we kind of plan to maybe open up the access so that the other users can kind of upload other different types of content as well. But you're right in terms of it's quite a cultural change for us as a business, in that people have been used to up to now kind of being spoon-fed, I suppose, to a degree, their learning. So trying to move away from that and get people more kind of self-sufficient and self-motivated will be quite a process, but that's one of our main aims going forward with as we continue to develop the system.
And just to add to what Sean said, I think, in any organisation you go to, when it comes to adding learning content onto a learning management system, you go on it, you want to add something, and the first thing you get is you can't do this because you're not an administrator. And I think this is one of the things that Thrive does offer as part of that user generated content, which is there is no limitations as to what people can do if it's switched on. And I think based on what Sean was saying, we're not there yet in terms of switching those features on, but we'll definitely be doing that in the future, just to enable users to get used to the learning experience platform, and then once they've got used to that, then kind of switching those features on to enable them to then have that empowerment to have that self-service, but also adding additional content on there to support our organisation.
Brilliant.
I think we also want to have a sufficient period of time to kind of set the tone as to what sort of content we're kind of planning to upload to Thrive, and although it's quite varied, there's still this debate, for example, internally between, well, what do we use Microsoft Teams for and what do we put on Thrive? And, I know some companies, I think Thrive yourselves might use the platform for internal communications. We're trying to separate the two right now and use Teams for comms and Thrive as a learning platform specifically. So once it's kind of bedded in, I think people will then be able to see the types of content that are on there before they start uploading themselves, so that we don't get, you know, a bit of a mix, if you like.
Absolutely. I think you're right. It is about understanding where different technologies fit within the wider ecosystem. I think, you know, like you say, at Thrive, we push a lot more comms out within our internal platform, but we still use GChat for quick conversations. The reality is, when it comes to kind of where we want to put content, we kind of have this argument or conversation that if we want to go back to it and we want to be able to reference it at a later date, then we'll put it on Thrive. If it's just a quick conversation, then actually do it through GChat and make it simple and clean. So yeah. No, you're absolutely right. In terms of, so Jack, I know you mentioned the campaign banner briefly at the top. Are there any other kind of campaigns that have worked particularly well?
So we did one called the scavenger hunt, didn't we? So which has gone down particularly well. We've done a few different campaigns, to be fair, some more successful than others. So the scavenger hunt was one that we did to kind of link in with the launch. So it was done in the second week, I think, after launch. And really this was to try and drive engagement of using the system, give people an opportunity to find their way around, see, you know, as much of the site as possible. And so we came up with 10 questions, and to get the answers, you need to go into different parts of Thrive to find those answers. And that had a really good response. You can see there was 268 views out of about 500 users. So that's a pretty good response, or that we felt it was. There was that carrot of a £50 prize for the winner, which people, you know, a lot of people like a bit of competition. But it kind of achieved what we were aiming to do. We've then done other sort of campaigns, some around our end of year performance reviews, which were March is when we do those. So we shared some content. There was a good video from our HR director, a bit about the process and how we changed it this year. And then other campaigns that we've run have been maybe less well received. And what we found is that they tend to be ones where they're kind of, it's interesting information, but it's not something that people kind of need to know right now or can use right now. It's more kind of nice to know stuff. And that's not to say people aren't interested. I think it's just a reflection of how busy we've been as an organisation in the sort of 6 or 7 weeks since we launched Thrive, particularly the last 3, that people, it's kind of low down on their priority list, I suppose.
Great. So the 2 takeaways for you then in terms of driving engagement is ensuring relevance of content and bribing them with money.
Yep.
Seems to be the 2.
I think that's what we've learned, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that or some free cake or something. I don't know.
Great stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a bit of a plan, or we set out a draft plan for campaigns for, you know, the next 6 months. And we did that before we went live, and we kind of looked at what things might be topical in terms of, you know, Learning at Work Week and things like International Women's Day and stuff like that. But also what things were we aware of going on in the business, that we could then run a campaign providing supporting information around those topics. And, you know, that's, again, we've now learned a few lessons, you know, 7 weeks in to kind of see which are the more or the better received ones. And so we can use that really to tailor the campaigns going forward. But yeah, you're right, a competition or something that's going to help someone right now are probably the most well received as we stand. So we might do more of the scavenger. We would look to repeat the scavenger hunt, for example, every month, but we might look to do similar types of content which are driving people to find their way around the system, particularly those users who still haven't really had an opportunity or a chance, an inclination, if you like, to really get in and have a look and see all the great content that's on there.
Yeah, and just to add to what Sean was saying, I think our operations side of the business are the ones that are kind of lagging behind, because obviously everything that's happening at the moment, they are just way too busy to spend any time to find stuff on Thrive or the LXP. So I suppose the only other thing to add is that we are encouraging users to come on to complete regulatory sort of content every month. So even if they don't navigate around and have a look at some of the content, over time they will eventually get maybe some tips that they've seen and go, oh, I actually quite like that, and then their inquisitiveness will then eventually take a hold of them, and then they'll end up using Thrive in that way. And I think it's just kind of just persevering and just kind of letting learners take their time in adjusting to the fact that the old LMS that we used to use was very static. You knew where you wanted to go. It's very comfortable. Whereas this one, there's a lot of content, and it's just then thinking, okay, well, so where is home for me now, and what do I need to do? And just accepting the fact that that change will take a little while as well.
Brilliant. I think just to give some context on just how busy you've been, I think you mentioned the other day that you're having 5 times the call volume that you would typically expect.
Yeah, that's correct.
So.
Yeah. So since the government announced about the payment holidays for from mortgage lenders, which was about the 18th of March, I think 17th of March. Since then, our phone lines have been receiving about 5 times the volume of calls that we normally get on a daily basis.
Wow.
So it's quite a big increase. And also, obviously, complication of people working remotely, because that happened literally within a couple of days of the whole business moving from being office-based to home-based, which had to be organised at quite short notice because there weren't immediate plans to do that. Some we'd already started working in that way to a degree, but other areas, particularly operations, hadn't planned to be doing that anytime soon, really, to be fair. So it was a great team effort and logistical exercise to do that. But it's fair to say, it's been quite a challenging period for us and probably most mortgage lenders, to be fair.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think it's fair to say that it's like I say, it helps cement ideas of what the future looks like when it comes to learning at Kensington, for sure. So I am just conscious of time, and obviously we've overrun ever so slightly. So I will open up the floor to any questions from any of our attendees, if there are any.
Sound like a tumbleweed going by.
It does look like there are currently no questions at the moment. I think, somebody has asked, well, they said, first of all, they said it looks great. So lovely little compliment there. But secondly, what was your biggest challenge when rolling out the platform?
Engagement, but also I think buy-in from certain stakeholders. So when it came to, we were quite fortunate. We brought in a contractor to support with this tender, as well as the sort of integration of Thrive into our sort of our infrastructure. The thing is that our biggest challenge was, like most businesses, is that sort of IT support. The single sign-on, we had that sort of implemented as part of this, and it was a new way of how we actually implemented single sign-on. So we actually use Microsoft Azure Active Directory as our sort of single sign-on, and so it was getting the resources because we've got a lot of change happening in our business at the moment, both digitally as well as, you know, other parts of business looking to change, either be their processes or their systems, is getting the resource to be able to support us. So I think that was one of the biggest challenges. And, you know, the second one would be the engagement. And so I think the engagement was just so key, where Sean and one of our former colleagues were doing a sort of insight sessions, and so with that kind of drove some engagement. But as I say, it's that operational side of the business that, because they're resourced to go on the phones, it's not as easy to kind of say, right, on Monday you can come to this session, without some prior planning and some notice. So I think that probably that's one of the biggest challenges that I've faced. I don't know, Sean, if you want.
Yeah, we did try to preempt that, didn't we? By we did kind of a 4 or 5 week countdown kind of comms plan that we again did mainly Microsoft Teams. And again, as Jack said earlier, we're still in the early stages of adopting Teams as well as an organisation. So usage is variable across the business. Some areas like ourselves, HR, probably use it more widely than perhaps everywhere in the business. But what we try to do is do some kind of like teaser communications leading up to it. So an initial comms about Thrive is coming, and we've got this exciting new platform on the way, and that was probably about 5 weeks before. And then something else a couple of weeks before, we did a bit of a video about why we in the L&D team are excited about Thrive and some of the opportunities it's going to open up. And then there was a kind of a 3, 2, and 1 day countdown of other things, just to, again, kind of generate that interest. And that was then followed by these insight sessions that Jack spoke about.
Yeah.
And I think, it was to a certain extent, we got quite a bit of engagement out of that, but we do recognise the challenges of certain parts of the business are unable or have been unable so far to maybe engage with it as much as we might have liked. So the first few weeks, perhaps the engagement with the site was a little bit lower than we might have envisaged, bearing in mind all of those comms for about the first 10 days. But then it's gradually picked up, and as we've done more and more campaigns and kind of learned from those and tried to really tailor the highlights to content that appeals to people right now, we've seen the kind of usage drive up. So we're now at a level of 87% of the business have logged on in the kind of initial week since we launched on the 24th of Feb, which is a pretty good going.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, I think, when it comes to the sort of the rollout, we were very fortunate to have the support from the customer relationship managers, and I think their experience really kind of comes through to give you a reassurance that it's okay, we are here to support, this is what one of our other clients did. But I appreciate Tom's probably going to ask us another question.
No, great, that was really useful. The next question, which we've sort of touched on, is, are you promoting the idea of user-generated content from your employees? Which,
Yep.
As I say, normally there is a component at the bottom of your homepage, which is a list of all of the questions that have been asked within Thrive. I'm not going to press enter here so that I don't reveal any personal data from anybody, but you'll see here, if I search for how do, we get a lot of questions of your learners that are asking them within the platform. And as we said, I think it's an iterative process for the future in terms of what new user-generated content you'll allow from your learners longer term.
Yeah, and to add to that, Tom, we've said goodbye recently to a knowledge retention tool that we used, and so we're going to be utilising Thrive as a sort of quiz tool that the team manager or the team member who's designated to do so can write their own weekly quizzes to kind of encourage people to test people's knowledge on either change that's happening in the business, or to encourage people to just have a random daily Thursday, Friday afternoon quiz. So that's kind of going to be the first step. So we only have question and quizzes available at the moment, but I think kind of going on to the next question, which is, well, what's next on our plan? I think that's one of the plans, which is that user-generated content. But I think also is that auto-curation. So you'll see just below on the screen here where you've got the Anders pink under the recommended for you. The next step is to start making the LXP have constant updates of new content coming through every week, every month. So that's going to be the next step. And I think on from that, it's then kind of encouraging more of a self-service for our colleagues, so that when they do have a query that they might think, oh, well, let me just go on Google, to try and encourage them to go to Thrive instead and try that platform first, because you never know, someone might have already shared that already. So I think there's a lot around user-generated content. And one thing I did miss was we have identified a number of content champions, and they are key to helping us build additional user-generated content from the relevant areas, and they will be supporting us in the future to create further content that could go onto Thrive as well.
Awesome. There is another question which I think you kind of touched on, which is here around, are you using any external content libraries? I think it's kind of worth mentioning around the offerings from Anders Pink and Get Abstract that are included as part of our platform. So you have access to and as Pink and the briefings that they offer or that we've curated or created as part of that offering. I think there's 8 or so around wellbeing, leadership, local news, world news, and a few others. And then there's also Get Abstract, which I know at the moment you said you haven't rolled out, but that's again on the plan. So if you're not familiar, for those that are kind of on this webinar, Get Abstract is an ebook provider. So they basically take condensed versions of existing titles. They take them down to kind of 8 or 10 page PDFs, and they've got something like 20,000 titles across hundreds of different topic areas. So leading on, I guess probably worth leading on that for us at Thrive, it's all around, like you said, relevance of content. So it's all well and good having a nice looking platform, but actually if the content doesn't satisfy a need for the learner based on what they've said they want to learn more about, then that engagement is going to drop off. So we're really keen to encourage additional content partnerships. Jack, I know we've had conversations with one of your other content partners previously as well. So it's probably worth touching, or you touching on that maybe.
Yep. Yeah. So we have a content provider, Franklin Covey, sorry, that we have where we've had an agreement with them, so we can host all of the content on this site as well. So with that, there's come a slight cost for us to be able to host those files. But what that means is that, again, we can track their actual profiles completing that, and they don't have to do that extra step from learning experience platform to then, in this case, the All Access Pass portal. And what that means is that rather than being in the moment, I'm looking on Thrive. So Tom, if you wouldn't mind just scrolling up, because I think there's another question around well-being. If you just close down the search and go to Discover tab, this is where somebody can really either look at the off-the-shelf content, so the external content libraries that we do have, things like well-being or mental health. This is most of it is mainly all off-the-shelf content that we've taken from Thrive. So as you can see here, there's quite a lot of stuff, and as I say, the same with the Franklin Covey material. We've got that under the manager section in the Discover page. So we have a number of different areas, and depending on which audience you're in, so if you're in a manager audience, if you manage more than one employee, or anybody, if you manage anybody, you will be able to gain access to this tab down the bottom, and only that content will be related to you. And what that means is that we can then filter that content to only go to certain audiences. So say if you've got off-the-shelf content or content libraries that you've only had a small population being included with that sort of license, you can then really hone it down so that only those people can see that content. So again, it's really important that with the LXP, it's that setup, thinking about audiences as well, because that is a key thing, and how that can kind of translate into the learning experience platform.
Brilliant. I think you mentioned as well earlier about using some of the Thrive off-the-shelf content. Obviously, that's all included, and I know you're using a vast majority of the content from our library as well.
Yeah, so the reason why we went for the off-the-shelf content is because, for one, we weren't expecting any of the off-the-shelf content, and we're really surprised with the amount of content that Thrive offer. There's about 8 or 9 different subject areas, one of which is finance, but it's mainly related around insurance, part of the finance industry. But we've pretty much uploaded all of the off-the-shelf content and tagged it, and it gives people a lot more piece of content to view, rather than have ourselves having to try and find content which, in other words, is already provided with the learning experience platform. And it's constantly, I think every week we've had a new email with new pieces of content. I don't want to set the precedent and say that that's the expectation, but we are very surprised as to off-the-shelf content being pushed out at a very fast pace, and I think it's amazing.
Brilliant. And then a couple more questions. So how are you measuring the impact of an LXP beyond views and completions of content? And Sean, I know you've mentioned when we spoke earlier in the week around kind of anecdotal feedback that you've had from your users, but yeah, if you can build on that question, that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, it's fair to say, again, we're quite in the early stages of using Thrive, so that's something that we're still going to kind of consider the best way of doing that. Because say I don't want to just look at an arbitrary, oh, we're going to reduce the number of face-to-face training hours to X percentage, whatever that might be. To me, that doesn't necessarily make sense, because you're not then looking at, you're just trying to work to that figure rather than pick the best method of delivery. So I think what we're going to need to do is really, we do an annual employee engagement survey, for example, and that might be one way of getting more feedback from our colleagues in terms of how they feel about how the learning has changed over this 12-month period since we did the last survey. So that would be a good measure of feedback. I think we'll also be looking to develop some measures with our key business areas that we work with, so primarily operations in particular. So as we roll out new kind of content solutions, depending on the different needs that are coming up, we'll be looking at the best way of measuring that. But yeah, it's fair to say it's still something that we're kind of thinking about. And if we've got any suggestions from others who've done something similar, we'd love to kind of share your thoughts as well on that.
Yeah, and I think just to add to what Sean was saying, you know, we do look with the customer relationship manager when we first, you know, take on board Thrive to say, so what do you really want to get out of the learning experience platform? I think the landscape slightly changed. So where Sean was saying reduce the content time or the classroom time, I think, you know, in reality, it's more so how many people have logged on, what sort of content is the most popular, and so how many views has that content had, and then kind of moving on from there, that would then kind of help us strategize our next step, which is, okay, this video was very popular. The question is why? Is it the medium or the method as to how it was delivered, or was it the fact that it was a video versus an article? So there's so many different sort of like matrices or different sort of statistics you can look at, and I think with Thrive we're working towards further information that we can then interrogate through the LXP to then kind of understand more. So it's all something that we're very new at still, but yeah, it will come over time.
Yeah, you're right. I think going from a platform where success was determined by compliance, and now to be in this world where you are, you know, views and completions are very valuable when they're viewed in the context of actually helping you define your content strategy. So how are you, you know, how is like you say, how is this content working? Is it on a Monday, for some reason loads of people are engaging with videos, but on a Friday they love files? Well, actually, if you link that back to your campaigns piece of actually drip feeding content and maximizing engagement that way to, yeah, truly see the value.
And so to kind of add to that, Tom, because I think I've just seen the question, the last one,
yeah,
is another engagement piece we have is before launch we had a Teams channel. So we have a communications channel set up in Teams, which we kind of communicated to the business. Thrive has come in, this is what it looks like, this is what the videos look like. And then on the launch day, because all our employees are all set up on this this Teams channel, we then set up a web page tab so that people that could then launch Teams to be able to go onto it. So it was a different way of people potentially going on to Thrive, but it was just harnessing the technology that people could utilize that they're familiar with already. It's not a like for like integration, but it's, you know, something that we've done from the beginning of integrating with Teams when we first launched it back in January.
Brilliant. I think that is all of the questions, and I'm conscious that we have managed to overrun by 25 minutes. So unless there's unless there's any more questions from the audience, I think we'll leave you to your extended bank holiday weekend.
Yeah.
Right. Thanks very much.
Brilliant. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Bye bye.